It's game day in the NCAA Tournament for the UConn Huskies. UConn versus Oklahoma in Raleigh. I'll see you there tonight. But first, a pregame show. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I want to say a moment to say how thankful we are for all of you. We appreciate your support, whether you support both the men's and women's, the entire university, or you're just a UConn men's fan that's jumping onto the show, or a basketball fan. If you haven't already subscribed, do so now. Follow us on all audio platforms. We really appreciate it. It helps us out. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering the UConn men's and women's basketball programs, the hoops capital of the world, and we're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. This episode is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery store or convenience store. Stock up today and stay energized. All right, it's a game day. Let's bring in Dan Meehan right now. We haven't seen him in a while. Really appreciate Dan coming on to do a preview show for UConn, Oklahoma tonight in Raleigh. By the time this comes out, it'll be tonight in Raleigh. I did a crossover pod with Locked On Sooners that I'm sure people will enjoy. But what I would tell you is, like, on paper, they're pretty similar. The teams are pretty similar. And one of the things, though, that I mentioned to Jay, who's a co-host on the show, is I said this to a few people yesterday, which is like, we're still kind of waiting for every one of our guys to show up at the exact same moment. Not just Terrace Reed going for 24 and 18, not Solo for 20, not just Liam for 38 on, separate occasions, and then Alex getting 21 against Villanova, but like all of these guys having not necessarily scoring days, but big time games in a big time moment. Do you think this happens against Oklahoma?
I'd rather have them, if they need to have a hiccup game and save it for something else, I'd rather have them do it in the second game of the tournament against a formidable foe in Florida, number one overall seed. I think that UConn can get by this Oklahoma team without each of the guys having their best day per se. I think coming into the matchup, like you said, on paper, there's some similarities, I think, size-wise at the guard positions. Mm-hmm. I think we are going to have a distinct advantage down low. I think this is going to be a big Terrace Reed game. This is the last starting five that Oklahoma rolled out in the SEC tournament against Kentucky. Jeremiah Fears, freshman, stud, 6'4". Jalen Moore, senior on the wing, 6'6". Bryson Goodine, senior, 6'4". Mohamed Wagoo, senior, 6'10". Duke Miles, senior, 6'2". And coming off the bench, Kobe Elvis, 6'2". So they're heavy at the guard position. This is going to be a big, tall task for the general, Hassan Diarra, guarding Jeremiah Fears, who has cracked many top 10s in mock drafts just this week. So we're talking about a kid that's going to be a top draft boards, come this summer, but he's a freshman. I don't know if we're talking about Porter Moser. Parker Moser.
Yeah, Porter Moser. Yep.
Porter Moser. He might have one foot out the door. He's been kind of rumored this week to be in some coaching conversations, taking other jobs. We'll see, but he'll have those guys ready. He had a couple of those Cinderella runs with Loyola a couple years ago. But again, I think that I saw your preview pod with Aaron Torres, and I couldn't agree more. Opponents that UConn play this year that only have two reliable scorers, guys that are in two or less in double figures per game in points. UConn, their scouting department is just so good. They're just going to key in on those guys. They're either going to let the one guy get his and shut down everybody else, or they're going to shut down and cut the head off the snake in Jeremiah Fears and let everybody come, the rest of that squad, fend for themselves and see if you can do it. I just really like the matchup on paper in this game. I think it's going to be a big Terrace Reed game. I think some lob threats with Samson Johnson are going to be there. And we haven't seen Liam McNeeley really performing really well for like 3 weeks now. If he's shooting the ball well going into this tournament, Look out.
Yeah, no, I agree. What's funny is like even in Evan Miyakawa's like how many like elite shooters do you have on each of your teams? Liam's not even on that. Like
Aiden made it and Liam didn't.
Well, just based off of the percentages, right? I think it kind of cracks out that way. And Aiden's playing well lately. You know, I think look, I mean, we can dog him all we want and like, you know, and be frustrated with what his production was all year. But let me tell you something. If we get an Aiden Mahaney appearance in this game or in a Florida game where he gives you 12, 15 points and gives you a lift offensively, it's going to be all hands on deck. Like it's surviving advance time. It's not, this is not time for, you know, 1 foot out the door situations. Like, you know, we talked about that with Porter Mosier. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but like, you kind of have to have those same thoughts about, you know, you hate to say it about UConn, but like some of these guys have alternative plans, right? And, you know, maybe there's not a lot, maybe there's a few. I don't think there's a lot that are playing. I would say that. What I would say is, even if they do have 1 foot out the door, whether it's you're talking about Jeremiah Fears, you know, some of the guys at Oklahoma, maybe they're thinking about Porter Mosier leaving and thinking about where they're going next, or UConn guys, if you perform well in the biggest stage, your stock goes up. So maybe if you have a few offers that are on the table from other schools, maybe you get a couple more. You get that NIL bag gets even bigger. So and also from UConn, like let's be honest, if someone unlikely that is thinking about leaving has a big run for UConn in this tournament, then maybe they upset you know, Florida if they get past Oklahoma, then I don't know, maybe they stay and they get a little bit of extra cash from the NIL ferry and it helps. You know what I mean? Like that's all possible. So I think it all has to be taken into account.
I think this is a big game for Mahaney. We've seen this UConn team that is with regard to both McNeeley the bench all of these games this season to whittle this roster and the rotation down to their 7-8 guys. Aiden Mahaney has become the trusted point guard coming off the bench to relieve Hassan Diarra in these games in the last few weeks. He's going to be the first guard off the bench tomorrow or on Friday when we play Oklahoma. He matches up size-wise well with Oklahoma's guards, and I just think that if you do have plans of taking on the Goliath that Florida is, you're going to need to save some Hassan Diarra for that matchup. So I think for that reason, if you are trying to navigate a 6-game slate and get through the gauntlet of this entire tournament, you're going to need to save some of Hassan Diarra and give Aiden, 10, 12, 14 minutes in this Oklahoma game where he can hang with their guards. So we'll see.
Yeah. The only thing I don't agree, I agree, but the only thing I don't agree on is like, look, man, if Hassan has to play 35 minutes tonight, that's life. Like, you know what I mean? Like if it's a close game, because this is a 5.5 point spread. I think all the money's on UConn. It was 4.5. It jumped to one up to 5.5 right now on like FanDuel and some other places. So like my biggest thing is you cannot, this is a win, whether you win by 2, whether you win by 7, I don't really care. Get that dub and then regroup, because Florida still has to play a game. I know they're gonna win, like 90% chance they're gonna beat that who they playing, Norfolk State, I think.
Yep.
So look, it's just one of those things where everyone has to rent's due every day now, and when you don't pay, you get evicted, and your time on the island is done. So I would love for them to be in my hood for an entire weekend and watch them play 2 games, because I'll be going up to that and covering it. But what I don't want is them to come out flat and have to rally and do all this stuff that they've done pretty much all year. That's my only fear. Has nothing to do with Jeremiah Fears. It's UConn's inability to kind of get out of the gates quickly and hold that lead. If we see that, then I think we're in good shape.
Yeah, there's one thing. So just going into this game, some of the things that Oklahoma does do well, I talked about I think it's a good matchup for us on paper, but you can't breeze over a team. They are close to the bottom of the standings in the SEC, but that's, as we know, a conference that has sent a record amount of bids to the national tournament this year. An Oklahoma squad that's on the bottom half of the standings in the SEC might be a really good school in another conference. Who knows? So we'll find out on Friday. They shoot the ball well as a team. They're 55th out of 364 teams in field goal percentage. They're almost top 40 in 3-point percentage. They're 8th in the country in free throw percentage, and they get to the line often. Their defense limits big runs. They've conceded the 3rd fewest kill shots in the country. But like we said, they're undersized. They're a poor rebounding team. They're 325th nationally in rebounds per game as a team.
Yep.
They have a limited shot blocking presence. They're bottom 50 in the country there. Like we said, just 2 players averaging double figures, Jeremiah Fears and Jalen Moore. Fears is their leading scorer. He's at about 17 a game. Doesn't even shoot 30% from 3. So if that is your biggest threat, if that guy's shooting 1 of 5, I don't know where the rest of the points are going to come from. They've got some other guys that are shooting close to 40% from 3, but you still got to get those guys the shots. UConn's played 8 games this season in which their opponent had just 2 players averaging more than 10 points a game. They're 7-1 in those matchups, and they've outscored those opponents by an average of 21 points a game. So using that kind of as a boilerplate going into this one, I like our odds, but still got to play the games. It's March.
Absolutely. All right. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of key factors about how UConn is going to be able to survive and advance this game, and talk about maybe the Florida potential next week. We're trying not to jinx it and look too far ahead of Oklahoma. All right. We're going to talk about that coming up. We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. When it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro-4X, the numbers are an MVP level type. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear and wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for 8 people, the Armada Pro-4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro-4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventure to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro-4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, huh? And if you're feeling that lost sleep, 5-Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA Tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up your busy schedule, 5-Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. I've been staying up late watching all these tournament actions, getting ready for these games, and it keeps me active. My 5-Hour Energy keeps me awake and ready to go, especially even for the next day. And it's whether I'm at a game or traveling, 5-Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps me refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack and have it delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today. Stay energized. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. Let's get that Nissan logo off, although they are a very valued sponsor. I like Nissans. Do you like Nissans? I've always liked them. Yeah.
I drove a few back in my day.
Yeah, I had a Nissan Altima. That was my that with the push button start. That was like the first, one of the first ones. That was my jam back in like the early 2000s, maybe up to 2011.
I'm a big fan of Fast and Furious franchise, the Nissan Skyline. Brian Earl Spillner.
There you go. All right, so this year has been kind of a weird one, and it shouldn't have been. Like I think we all got jazzed up about potential for three-peat and all that stuff. And I think for me, it became pretty evident that we just had to kind of ride this out. And then when Liam got hurt, like I think that's the thing that people forget is like there's been inconsistencies, but this team was rolling when Liam got hurt, and who the hell knows where this team would have been? Could they have been like a 3 seed or a 4 seed? Could they have taken on St. John's in a better fashion had Liam played, or in at least even if he was just a little bit injured, missed a couple games and played in 6 of the 8 games that he missed? Does that does that change the trajectory of the season? And the short answer is probably yes, but here we are. And, we have to deal with. And so for me, that's why we're in the position we're in as an 8 seed. And it doesn't get any easier if we beat Oklahoma. If let's take a kind of a quick glance. What I think, I'll tell you the biggest issue that I think UConn will have is I don't think Oklahoma scares them at all, but 3-point shooting is the great equalizer. And if you have multiple shooters that shoot 40% from three, and the impetus is to get the ball out of Jeremiah Fears' hands, and you get, if you look at Xavier's win over Texas the other night, you get a guy like Marcus Foster, a Furman transfer, who probably averages 5 or 6 points a game, goes for 18 or 19. And all of a sudden Texas goes, what the hell, man? Our scouting report was this. And now this guy's lighting it up. So that always happens in March. So what I hope we see is the attention to detail and then adjustments if need be, right? That's my key to the game is you want to stop Jeremiah Fears, but we also don't want to be so stubborn that if a guy an example of that guy Marcus Foster goes crazy, you got to be able to adjust to that as well.
Yeah, and I think UConn has a little bit more to turn to with how their roster is kind of is constructed. They've got more on the wings. They're just taller. UConn so many times this year has been the smaller team. This is one matchup I think that favors them. I'll beat you over the head with the size stuff. It's important come March. You talk about a Duke, who's one of the number one seeds. They're the longest starting five in the country. Their point guard is 6'6". They fill all the passing lanes. That's going to be important for this UConn defense against some of these 6'2" guards. They're experienced and they shoot well. They've got a couple guys off the bench that are 38, 39, 40% from three. You just got to limit those guys, and I think you'll be okay. Personally, I don't know where all of the points are going to come from this Oklahoma squad. And like we said, UConn, their fate is probably different. We were rooting down the stretch to hopefully win that Big East tournament to get down to that 7 seed line. So you kind of avoid playing one of these big time number 1 overall seeds that seem to be just a step above, a hair above some of the 2 seeds. I would have loved a Houston matchup. I think UConn size wise matches up well against that team too. Florida's going to be a bear, but they got to get by Oklahoma first. But Lee McNeeley, like we mentioned, hasn't been shooting the ball from 3 all that well. I think his dribble penetration, getting to the line, he's still doing all of those things and creating for this team. UConn, I think I like that they can score pretty much at every position. They've got 4 guys that can drop 20 on you on any given night. If they can get, like you said, 4 or 5 of these guys going on the same night, they are still one of the most dangerous teams in the country. We've had an up and down season. It's kind of been a roller coaster ride the entire year, trying to figure out who the rotation guys are going to be, who our starting centers should be. Can we get Caravan going and out of some of these slumps? Can we get Ahmad Noel going off the bench? Can we get Lee and McNeeley back from an ankle injury? If all the stars align on the same night, this is still a top 10 offense in the nation, and they can take down anybody. We've seen the UConn team historically in 2014 with the Shapaz Napier squad that took down the number one seed in Florida, went on to win a national championship. I don't know if this team, I think this field is really strong this year. I just think it's filled out more so in past years. I think the cream rises to the top more so in this NIL era. But they're still really dangerous if they can get all these guys on the same page on the same night.
Yeah, I think I do feel as though the top 4 seeds, and then you could throw Tennessee in there. You could throw, who's another 2 seed, St. John's. There really isn't a huge. I don't think there's a huge drop from the 1s to the 2s. I think part of it is, psychologically when you go into these games, if you're a 7 seed playing a 2 seed, it doesn't feel as daunting. But just I know that sounds hokey and kind of weird, but I think that's the truth of the matter. There hasn't been a ton of 8-1 upsets. There's been a ton of 7-over-2s, including one where UConn, took out I believe Michigan State, right? So it's one of those things where I think that's part of it. It's so funny. It's you're almost better off being a 10 or an 11 versus an 8 or a 9 in having like a worse season. So, we were, yelling and screaming about their seeding. I almost feel like being like, hey man, like, yeah, just put us at a 10. We're cool. Like we, stay at a 10. Because you're still in that same position. There's no advantage to being a 10 over a 10 or a 7. You're playing the exact same position, same time. So I do like, I what I do love. I was talking to my barber yesterday because we're obviously going to Raleigh. I do love that if UConn takes out Oklahoma tonight, Florida isn't going to have a huge fan advantage the way like Duke will if they're in Raleigh, or the way Auburn will if they're in Atlanta, or even the way Louisville will when they're in Lexington, like that kind of stuff. Like there's no like, if the team gets a lead, it's like the crowd, it'll feel like a road game. If UConn hangs tough with Florida and takes a lead, the entire crowd is going to be with them, because Florida is not exactly, doesn't have a huge foothold in Raleigh, and everyone loves to see an upset. Everyone loves to see number 1 go down. So I think that's what also I'm banking on too, is that if they do get into that situation, they actually will have crowd support. It'll feel more like a home game to them. So that's a cool part.
I just want to talk through some of the highlights of this Florida team and where some of the opportunities for UConn might lie, because they're outmatched. This Florida team is good everywhere. They've got size. All 5 of their guys can put the ball on the deck. They can pass. They shoot the ball well. They're an elite rebounding team. They've got a stud guard in Walter Clayton Jr. Multiple. So this is the number 2 overall team in the country. They've got the best offense in America. Finished 30-4. They score 85 points a game. 59th in tempo. They play fast, just like all these SEC schools. Their resume quality rank, they beat everybody. They were 11-4 in quad 1 games. That's one of the best quad 1 resumes in the country. I think it'll be really interesting to see which of our assistant coaches, they typically alternate. It'll be all hands on deck for these games, but Luke or Kamani, I'm interested to see who's sitting next to Dan first on the bench. That typically means that that guy had the scout. So that'll be interesting to see. Florida's leader, Walter Clayton, this guy was a sophomore on that Rick Pitino-led Iona team that we took down in the first round. They played us tough in that game. He was a sophomore on that team. He reminds me a lot of, like, he's a kind of a bigger version of Shabazz Napier. Guy floats out there. He's super athletic. He can get his shot off anytime he wants. Kind of just, he can like move his body to get his shot off in any kind of angle. He's got good body control. He can play above the rim. He's a total leader. Scores 17 a game. Todd Golden, the coach, 3rd appearance in the tournament as head coach. He has not won a tournament game in his career, so something to keep your eye on. He lost once with San Francisco and then lost last year in his first year at Florida. These guys, like I said, they play fast. They take 64 shots a game. It's 13th most in the country. So even if they have an off shooting night, they're just, the sheer volume of which they shoot the basketball is enough to beat you. They're not a great free throw shooting team. They're just shy of 72%. That's 200th in the country, but elite rebounding team. They're at 42 rebounds a game, which, like, historically is just a massive number. The 04 UConn team has the most rebounds of any national champion since the 74-75 UCLA teams. So when you start talking about a team that's got 42 rebounds a game, like, they're taking the shots, like they're taking 65 shots a game. So the rebounds are going to be there. But that is something that our UConn team has been very poor at this season. So if, stars align and we get by Oklahoma, that'll be something to keep a look at.
No, I totally agree. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to put a bow on this, get some predictions from myself and Dan, and look forward to watching the games. Be right back. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. I do have one promo to show you guys. If you have a Fire TV, or if you want to look on Amazon and find an app, there's a bracket breakdown show that my friends Isaac and others are doing in Dallas. As a studio show through Locked On a podcast network. I'm gonna let them tell you about it.
The NCAA Tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA Tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
A little something different for you in terms of, looking at studio shows differently. I mean, if you're tired of listening to Seth Davis, if you're tired of listening to Charles Barkley, not know who the players are, go check out our bracket breakdown with the Locked On College Basketball guys, Andy and Isaac, as well as Gordon Hayward's going to be there, Monique Billings, who's a WNBA player, and others. So, an absolutely cool studio show they're doing this year, and hopefully they'll continue it. So bottom line for me is live ball turnovers are no tonight. They got to stop Jeremiah Fears. Absolutely try to guard the 3-point line, get them off the 3-point line. Because they don't have elite post players or anybody that we're super scared about. My thing is, look, you got to not allow, but if this team gets paint touches, it's not a bad thing because they're looking to score from the outside. And if they get past Oklahoma tonight, the biggest thing with the Florida game is you just got to stay close. And because if you watch I watch a ton of SEC because my wife is a Tennessee fan. And so I've watched way too many Florida games this year that I've just been like, they are tough. And so they're the only team in the country that went into Auburn and beat them by 9 points on the road. And they also went into Alabama and beat them by double digits as well. They just beat Alabama by 20 in the SEC tournament. They beat a Tennessee team that is incredibly difficult to score on. They score almost 90 points in the SEC final. They are a tall order, but playing the NCAA tournament is a different animal than just playing in that, really difficult SEC. I think we need to pump the brakes and kind of wait to see what the early returns are in the SEC, if they were truly the greatest conference of all time, or if this is just a really good kind of stacked deck where they just get a ton of credit because of how good they are during the season. But you got to prove it now in the NCAA tournament. I think that is my biggest thing is let's see what happens, when they jump the ball up, if we're fortunate enough to play Florida.
Yeah, something I think that I don't think it's going to happen, but something that UConn, an ace card that they could pull is to try to smack Florida in the mouth early with a lineup change starting Terrace Reed at center. I don't think we're going to see it, but it's something that they could do to try to start faster than they have. If you're going to keep up with this team that's run and gun, they play incredibly fast tempo-wise, 85 points a game. Some of these SEC games just like once a week are in the hundreds, which is just nuts for college basketball.
UConn may have to score 100 points if they beat Florida.
I think that's the one opportunity UConn might have in this game to exploit some of what Florida does well is UConn plays slow. They're bottom 30 in tempo in the nation. They are a half-court team. If this is a transition game, we're going to lose by 20. If you can make it a half-court game, keep the scoring in the mid-70s, low 80s, I think you give yourself a much better shot than trying to run with these guys that have 4 and 5 guys averaging over 12 points a game. Like they're just too athletic. They rebound the ball too well. They take too many shots. You got to try to slow the game down and negate some of the things that Florida just really excels at.
Couldn't agree more, man. What's your prediction first with the Oklahoma game? What do you got?
Yeah, let's not put the cart before the horse, right?
Yep.
I like UConn by 9 in this game, 75-66. I think the spread, 5.5 over under is 147. So I like UConn by 9.
I said in the crossover pod, I could see, I think it was 4.5 when we did it. So I said I could see this being a cover, but I could also see this being like a backdoor cover where it's a close game, two possessions, and then UConn is up late. They push it to like 7 or 8. I think I did like 80-74 or something like that. So I think that's what we're going to see. Maybe 80 to low 80s, high 70s, where they potentially they hold Oklahoma to low 70s, high 60s, and they win this game by more than 2 possessions. But I could see it being a really close game for the majority of the contest.
I could see UConn handling the game for majority of the 40 minutes, and then just kind of maybe a backdoor cover. Keep in mind, I think this UConn unit, not this team specifically, but I think they come into this tournament covering 12 straight spreads in the national tournament, dating back 2 years ago, which is a record. So they're going for 13. Dan Hurley's 14-4 in his career in the national tournament. I like the matchup, so let's go.
I
Huskies.
do too. Porter Moser has the one run with Loyola, or two really, Final Four in the Sweet 16, but he
in
has
the big leagues now.
Yep, yet to do anything at Oklahoma. In fact, when I had that conversation with Jay, who's the co-host of Locked On Sooners, he was just like, his first reaction was, "Oh, we made the tournament." So like, I don't even think Oklahoma fans thought they were going to make the tournament. So there's a happy to be there mentality, and I think UConn can exploit that. And I do think they're going to win the game tonight. So, all right, this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. Really appreciate Dan coming on and providing some, some stats and some of his own opinions. And hopefully we see him next week, and we're talking about UConn in a regional in San Francisco, playing against, how crazy it would be. I joked around, like, how crazy it would be if UConn played St. John's in the Elite Eight in San Francisco, like the most random place where they could play this game. All right.
Play those guys in a phone booth. Doesn't matter. Send us out west. Doesn't matter.
Absolutely. All right. Stay locked in. Go Huskies. Game day.
Go Huskies.